Well, good evening. Welcome to Get Real with Rick Dancer. And tonight we're doing Montana. We're talking about timber and the industry and how it works and what's going on and what's making it tough, what's making it hard, how many mills they have compared to what they used to have. And so joining me in just a second is going to be a guy who works at a local mill over in Deer Lodge, which I'm in Townsend. Deer Lodge is an hour and 20 minutes on as I'm told now, the Columbia side of the drainage, which is what you guys are on in Oregon. And I'm now on the Missouri drainage. You learn so much when you live on the Continental Divide. In Oregon, it's a different kind of divide. It's the Republican and Democrat divide. In Montana, it's the Continental Divide. That's a lot bigger. So let's kind of kick off. And I want to thank our sponsors, Dr. Michael Bratland with Chris Dental Family Dentistry. If you have not made your appointment for the fall, you need to get in because everybody just put the summer off and now they need to get their dental work done. So make an appointment, give him a call. Also, Compton Family Wineries out of Philomath, Oregon. They're a regenerative farm. That's the hardest word for me to say. And so, which means they take care of the soil. They're watching how everything works. In fact, I talked to an agency here in Livingston, Montana, that's doing that with cattle ranching now in Montana. They're doing regenerative cattle ranching where they're kind of giving the soil some resting time. And we're going to be doing some stuff with them in October to kind of show Oregonians what's going on over here in Montana. I think sometimes we think in Oregon that, we're the only ones who are, and I'm using progressive in the term, not a political term, but progressive as in progressing on to a better life. And it's happening all over the country, and that's what we want to show you. So let's kick off the show. We'll get our ads going, and then we're going to talk to Shawn Steinbach. Hold on.
Rick Dancer here. Before the fall rush sets in, now is the time to get in to see the dentist. Oregon's best dentist, and still my dentist, is Dr. Michael Bratland at Chris Dental in Eugene. Dr. Bratland and his staff are second to none. You have a tooth you need crowned? Give them a call and they'll get you in ASAP. Remember, at Chris Dental, everyone is welcome. Vaccinated?
Matt Compton with Compton Family Wines, Philomath, Oregon. We're at our state vineyard. Right now we're working on the Pinot Blanc. We're in the middle of summer pruning right now, so the grapevines are growing. We had the spring was very wet, a lot of moisture in the ground, so the vines are going to be very vegetative this year. So we're conquering all that vegetative growth that they want to have this year to focus on the fruit, which is down here. So we had fruit, we had bloom in early July, and which is rather late for us. That's about 2 weeks later than normal. But right now you can see we have good fruit set. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of leaf pulling too. So we'll pull leaves and open up the fruit zone. And it's not so much that we're trying to get sunlight on it, but we're trying to keep it the good airflow going.
So that's Compton Family Wines over in Philomath. Any Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you can go there and taste it. If you say you saw it on Rick Dancer, you get $15 off your first 2 bottles or more. So there you go. So Shawn, this is Shawn Steinbach. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing very well. Thanks, Rick. Thanks for having me.
They don't grow a lot of grapes in Montana, do they?
Not a lot. I'm sure somebody will say, well, you're wrong about that we grow grapes over here. Not that I know of, no.
Somebody asked me the other day because I was talking about the winery, and I said, but they are in Baker City, which is pretty similar in Oregon, in way far eastern Oregon. They are growing a specific variety that actually does well in cold weather. And so they've figured it out. But it's harder. But, hey, that's what I love about Montana. Everything in Montana is harder. You have to work a little harder I'm out, I got to have a wood stove now because I'm preparing for the winter. So I had the wood delivered, 2 tons of wood, and I'm out there stacking it going, that's a lot of wood.
Yeah. Well, that's the way my a buddy I used to work with, he always said, yeah, Montana, we're always the first to go into a recession and the last to come out. Everything's always harder.
Yeah. But what I also like about Montana a lot is, when it gets really, really cold, insects die. And there's not a lot of people who can put up with this, if you're going to live in Montana, you can't be a lazy ass, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
That is the truth.
You know what I mean? You have to work, and a lot of people work more than one job. So that's just how it works. So let's talk about, you tell me who you work for and kind of what you do, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I work for a small family-owned sawmill in Deer Lodge, Montana, Powell County. It's called Sun Mountain Lumber. It's owned by Sherm Anderson, and he and sons and grandsons and wife and daughter all run various portions of the mill operations. And he's got some other ventures that he handles out of Deer Lodge, but I think he's got logging sides and things like that. But the sawmilling is where his heart is, and I think it fluctuates, but we probably employ somewhere's around 250 people between our sawmill and the logging infrastructure, trucking infrastructure that we've got.
And so what are you producing? Is this 2x4, 2x6s?
Yep. So we're 2x4, 2x6, 8 and 9 foot length as needed. And then we've also got a finger joint facility. So we can take shorts and make them into finger jointed material.
So I was talking to one of our clients, is Douglas Timber Operators, the other day, and he said, Rick, in Douglas County, we have more mills than most states in the country, and including Montana. He says we have just in Douglas County. And I think in Oregon, we always think, the timber industry is going out. And yes, it's been damaged a lot. And a lot of timber companies, not a lot, but a handful of the bigger guys are actually moving to South Carolina, where it's more timber friendly. They're selling out of their Oregon stuff. But in terms of Montana, how many mills did you used to have, and how many do you have right now?
So when I was a kid, there was probably, there was a zillion mom and pop small operations, but there was probably 38 more major mills going in the state of Montana, and today we're sitting at about 6 that I would call larger mills. So it's come down substantially since.
And the problem for you guys is you don't have much privately owned timber. Explain that to my audience.
Yeah. So touching on talking about people moving to the Southeast, where it's majority privately owned ground. We're in our log yard right now. We're probably sitting on about 80% federal timber, and it's not the greatest place to be. It's to be that reliant. Some of that wood we're chasing in Idaho, Wyoming. We're a couple hundred miles of haul distance to keep us in wood and keep us wooded. So it's difficult. If we had more private, let's say Plum Creek or some of these, Stimson used to own quite a bit of land in the state of Montana. And so we had more private influx of material, but I'm sure the same as Oregon, our private forest lands, ranch lands have been so subdivided, and the traditional timberlands that were owned by timber companies have been sold, that it's just a changing dynamic of ownership, and people don't feel the need to sell trees to make money like that.
So you say development, what do you mean? In terms of ranch land, you mean homes and properties and
homes and subdivisions, homes, properties. And if if we've got an influx of some fairly wealthy folks that they don't need money from timber to operate their ranch land.
So they're buying hundreds or thousands in Montana. It's probably thousands of acres, and they want that timber just to sit there and to enjoy. They're not. It's not an economic thing for them.
Yep. Or that ranch. We'll say the family ranch has sold, the matriarch, patriarch have passed. It sells. The next person to buy it chunks it up, and you end up with 20 acre, 5 acre, 1 acre blocks. Well, that's timber ground it's gone. For our purposes.
Yeah, and that hurts you guys a lot.
A lot, yes.
So what's that like when you have to drive 200 miles to get a truck, one truck of logs? I mean, we see them coming out of the McKinsey. You'd probably just be drooling. And part of the problem for you guys is all the federal regulations that are put on the federal lands, because there's enough timber on federal lands, but you don't get access to enough of it because of all the little rules.
Yeah. People in your area on the coast they have no concept of how far we're hauling logs. A mill is a distance is 50 miles for them, I would guess, or 25 miles, whereas it's not unheard of to be hauling logs, 250, 300 miles. It's not the norm, and we try to avoid it. But when fuel hits $5, diesel hits $5.50 a gallon, it's a killer. The only thing that's really been helping us right now is, or at least as of late, is the market's been reasonably good, but fuel eats all that up to bring the raw material to the facility.
So talk to me about the fire danger, Sean. Because up here, I'm sure, because we're in Montana, everybody's a neighbor. I don't care if you live in Glendive. We're all kind of in the same place, and it's like Helena's had a ton of just little, smaller fires, the 12, 1,500, but they're just bursting up. So in terms of forest management, how has the lack of forest management contributed to the forest fire problems you have here in Montana?
It's more fuel. We've been actively, and I would venture successfully, suppressing wildfire for over 100 years now, and our harvest and our treatment of those forested lands has gone down significantly over the last 50 years. And so it's not a great surprise that we've got the fire hazard that we do. I would like to plug, I know the city of Helena, our capital, just had a fire right behind the Capitol. And I know personally a gentleman who works for the city that did some thinning up there. And they did have a fire and it ran through there, but I really attribute the good work they did, the thinning that they did, to making that a little easier to get a hold of. And
you are right, because my wife and I we went up there like 2 months ago. It's the first time we've ever been up there, and we went on a run, which, note to self, it's a really high mountain. But we ran up there, and there were stacks of timber, like small, it wasn't timber, it was small trees that were cut down. And Catherine and I are going, man, they take good care of this park, because you don't see that much in Oregon, where that underbrush, that's a big problem for fire and for timber companies, isn't it? When we sit and leave that, especially on federal lands, because a private timber owner can go in and thin and clean it up. But on the federal forest, is that the same here in Oregon? They just let it sit there, like Mother Nature does such a great job of handling this.
Yeah. In depending on where you are in Oregon, I think you have decomposition rates that far exceed, a tree laying on the ground out of Helena is going to be there in 100 years, whereas a tree laying out on the ground in Douglas County, I would guess, would be gone in 5 years or something. So there's a difference there. But I guess to that point, my big concern is if you don't, let's say the Forest Service, if they're not treating that small stuff and building that infrastructure that's capable, we're not, as a sawmill and a logging company, we're not capable cost effectively to treat, really small pre-commercial thinning. Whereas, like the stuff you were talking about running through in Helena, if you don't put up those kinds of projects, you don't have that infrastructure, those guys that are building businesses to take care of that kind of stuff. And we really have a lack. It's difficult when those kind of projects come up. It's difficult to find workers to do that type of stuff. And so I guess I would suggest from the bottom up, we really need to get a handle on this forest management, even at that level, and build that infrastructure.
If you could sit down with President Biden, what would you? Well, now remember, you're being nice, Sean. About specifically, he has some things that he's talking about coming up that are going to affect you guys and Oregon in a pretty big way. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we've got an old growth and mature forest executive order 14072. I truly believe that it's well intended, but it is absolutely disastrous. And I'll only speak for the state of Montana. Absolutely disastrous for the state of Montana. My feeling is this: they're going to try to hold a dynamic system at one point, right? So old growth is that's just a stage in a dynamic system that forests that from regeneration are getting to. And so I feel like we're really trying to find ways to, first and foremost, to stop forest management. That's, to me,
that's really the end goal, is that they want,
that to me is the end goal. And so if they come up with it, what I suspect is going to happen is we're going to end up, or we're going to try to end up with an age, with a diameter and an age, and probably some other associated factors. But they've been throwing out this 80-year-old tree. You know, we will manage for 80-year-old trees, and we're not going to want to cut anything over 80 years old. We don't have any trees in the state of Montana that my mill can use that are under 80 years old. You don't get a sizable tree in the state of Montana till about 100 years. So it wouldn't be what anybody would consider old growth. B, every mill in the state will be done just like that if we hit an 80-year-old.
How close are they to doing that?
Well, we're just in it's the federal government. And so the idea was, when the executive order came out, that there would be an inventory. Well, first they were going to define old growth and mature forest, and that their subsequent inventory of old growth and mature forest would take place. And this all needed to be done by April of 23. That's a huge lift. I highly doubt that's going to happen. And they've provided an opportunity for anybody to comment. And so, of course, we're putting in comments along those lines that it's just not a good idea to my big problem with it is in forest, in every national forest, the forest plan, they already have using Green et al. or whatever metric, they've got old growth, what they consider old growth and mature forest mapped out. There's not a whole lot about any forest in the state of Montana, or I would venture nationwide, that the Forest Service doesn't know about. So to say again that we're going to inventory this and we're going to define this, it's a repetitive motion that's going to be incredibly expensive. And we're not going to learn anything new. What it's really intended to be, in my opinion, is another roadless type rule that precludes the remaining forested, the remaining national forest land in the state of Montana. It's basically, if it doesn't preclude it from management, it will be an even more cumbersome process in an already incredibly cumbersome process. And so what it'll equate to is the courts are going to manage our forests from afar, which they're essentially already doing. Right. And that's my big fear, is we're going to take more ability, more of our line officers with the Forest Service. We're going to remove more of their ability to do good work on the ground in a timely fashion. And it's unfortunate because they're really trying. I mean, I deal with a lot of district rangers and forest supervisors here, and they're good. They want the same thing. They want to be able to do their job and stay out of court and do the right thing.
So maybe one of the questions for President Biden would be, in your Delaware mansion, how much of that is timber structure and how much of it is steel?
Right. Because
what is so hypocritical about this stuff, Sean, and I'm not putting this on you, you can agree with me or not, but it's so hypocritical, is that most people live in a stick frame house. Mm-hmm. Even a modular house has tons of wood in it. If we move to a place where you have to have steel 2x4s, the carbon footprint on production of steel is way more than what it costs to cut timber. And what I have not yet gotten anyone from the environmental community to talk to me about is a tree is a carbon filter. Mm-hmm. So the more you plant trees and reforest, the more you're building a natural greenhouse carbon sequesterer. But nobody wants to talk about that part of the story. And then when you cut it down and you put it in a house, it's actually storing carbon. So it's like a storehouse. Mm-hmm. And so we should be able to feel good about building homes and trapping this stuff and then replanting. And
we're in the middle of a housing crisis.
Nobody can afford to buy a house, so we're going to make it even more expensive and more difficult to make 2x4s and 2x6s. And I mean, it's like, I'm sorry, but to my friends who are, you know, in a different camp, I just want to say, you guys, this is teetering on stupidity. I will use the word ignorance, but no, I don't even think it's ignorance, because I think they know.
They do know.
But I don't understand why we live in a place that this continues to happen, and it's because it's a feel good.
It's the romance. Yep.
Isn't that? And how do you feel with your, you know, hundreds and hundreds of employees? You know, you're fighting for their jobs every day.
Oh, I'm scared every day, and you know, really, I guess if we were going to be talking with Biden about it, you know, I applaud the wildfire strategy. This, you know, this 10-year strategy to reduce fuels. And so why would we hamper ourselves with this executive order doing what I believe it will do, or what I believe it's capable of doing, and then have this strategy that we tout that we're moving toward? I don't see those two ideas converging very well. So.
Sean, did you guys in Montana have to deal with the spotted owl thing?
We did not. No, okay. But we have lynx, we have grizzly, we have bull trout.
Right. So one of the interesting things about the spotted owl in Oregon is, one, after years, as a news anchor, after years of covering the story, it turned out that the barred owl was actually destroying the spotted owl. But that was a VO bite, like a short little blurb on the news one night. And then it was like, oh, okay, we did that, you know, so nobody talked about that part. But the other ironic thing, I was talking to the Douglas timber operators the other day, and they told me, here's the interesting thing, Rick. So we set aside all this spotted owl habitat in Oregon. And 2 years ago, coming up, the anniversary is Monday, Labor Day, we had the worst fires all over the state with this windstorm. It was a perfect storm, and it just burned up thousands and thousands and thousands of acres. Well, guess what? Because they didn't thin, because they didn't manage those forests properly, because of their very rules to protect the spotted owl, they destroyed spotted owl habitat in that forest fire. That is just absolute stupidity.
It's insanity. I've got, if we have time, I've got a similar narrative.
Tell me. Oh, please. I want to hear the Montana story.
So this is, I really liken the, this executive order with the roadless rule, you know, the inventoried roadless. And so we've been working really well with the Forest Service. Like I say, they're all about doing good work. Out of the city of Butte, their drinking water is a watershed called the Basin Creek watershed. Okay. And in the past, when they came out with the roadless rule, they made of the Basin Creek watershed, they made about 60% of that in inventoried roadless. And I'm positive at the time they thought they were doing a good thing. We want to protect Butte's drinking water. We don't want to cut all these trees. We don't want roads. We don't want this to be a disaster. Well, fast forward through, you know, the beetle epidemic in, the early 2000s, mountain pine beetle wiped out this whole watershed. These are all dead trees that died in probably 2004, 2005. And so they started getting organic material decomposition, and it was beginning to taint the watershed. They tried to put up a timber project. Things didn't quite pan out, and it was fought about in court. They finally ended up winning and doing a little bit of treatment, not enough. So they didn't treat anything in the roadless area, and they didn't treat those acres. Fast forward even more years, and all of a sudden the decomposition of these trees, and they're falling over, and we have this incredibly difficult task, because you don't just get to operate in inventoried roadless, right? People they want to stay away from it. Well, so what they did was they built a $35 million water treatment plant, right? Thinking that would take care of it. Well, the decomposition rate, so they've got haloacetic acid. I learned this from their water treatment guy. They've got this increased levels of haloacetic acid, which is on the verge of making this $35 million water treatment plant not useful, in addition to the wildfire hazard that they've got out there. And if the watershed burns, that whole $35 million water treatment plant is, you throw it in the garbage and you're done. You're looking for water somewhere else. And so my point is to avoid cutting dead trees, which to me would be a no-brainer. We can use them here at the
Right.
mill. It benefit the whole watershed. To avoid cutting those trees, they built a water treatment plant to the tune of, because this was a pure watershed. They didn't have to, it was an open reservoir. They didn't have to treat it like that. They didn't have to do anything to the water. It was good drinking water. And so they put this water treatment plant in. The trees remained dead and remained decomposing. And all of a sudden they realized that, well, we should have just cut the trees in the beginning and started a new forest and had things going in the right direction. And so now we're fighting, and we're trying to, the Forest Service is trying to build a project to treat those acres. And it's so difficult in a roadless area. And you're going to have the crosshairs on you as soon as the project, as soon as they get into the NEPA process. The environmental community is going to have it's got the potential for having a heyday with the project, because it is in roadless airport. A large portion of it is in roadless, and then if we get this old growth rule, we're going to be in some serious trouble.
Well,
And it's an altruistic. You can't get a better reason to treat something than drinking water.
Right. It could have been avoided if you would have just cleaned up. And it just makes me insane. I mean, the number my wife and I we were evacuated from this. So we lived off the McKinsey, and we lived on a side road, and it was like Grand Central Station with log trucks. They were, private timber companies getting that stuff out of there as fast as possible, because you got about a year to really salvage it in Oregon because of the moisture and all that. So they were just hauling it out of there. And here next door in the federal forest, it's just sitting there rotting. When you're going, we have a housing crisis, and you're sitting here with future homes just rotting on the ground so that you can feel better and like this natural process. Well, if we used a natural process to grow crops, other crops, because trees are a crop, and that's what people have to understand. This is farming trees, and you can do it quite successfully. I went to Mount St. Helens for a timber company to show a story, and where Mount St. Helens in Washington State blew up, it destroyed. I mean, it just like a moon. It looked like the moon, and this has been, 40 years. It was 80s. Yeah. And I went up there. I was a news reporter, and it's been 80 years or 40 years. And then, but everywhere around it, where Weyerhaeuser and other companies came in and reforested, it's like they're on their second growth of trees. It's beautiful. And you walk up there and go, look what Mother Nature did. And you go, no. Look what the timber companies did. This, where nobody touched it, that's what Mother Nature did. And she's doing a shitty job of restoring that area. And so that's what people need to look at, instead of saying, we just don't have to manage things. Well, guess what? Human beings and animals and all of us live here, and we have to manage this, whether it's a ranch or a tree forest or agriculture with my neighbors out here growing alfalfa. It has to be managed because we need to do that. Humans are going to be involved, and they act like we're all supposed to just, live in a steel house. And I don't even think they think that far, but that's what drives me crazy is they're not thinking about the outcomes.
Yeah. And I would offer, going back to federal lands, only about, I don't know if I have the number exact, but I would say only about 25% of federal land in the state of Montana is even available for harvest, right? So you've got suitable base, and then suitable base, or not suitable base, but there may be opportunities to harvest, and then wilderness, inventoried roadless, wilderness study area. You've got all these other designations, and so really, what we are even talking about operating on is such a small percentage of the overall. I don't see the problem with it. We want jobs. We want healthy forests. I want to recreate. I want to manage forests. I hunt. I fish. I drink water. I want things clean. But the state of things, you can see what inventoried roadless and the way we've allowed the Forest Service to manage their forested acres, it's apparent to me. I mean, because we haven't been doing the timber harvest on federal land has been in a nosedive over the last 50 years. And so if we haven't solved the problem or the perceived problem by stopping timber harvest, then the timber harvest isn't the problem, because it's basically at a standstill now.
How frustrating is that? And do you feel like they listen to you?
Well, Rick, I had a full head of hair when I started this, and you can see the stress level. It's extremely frustrating because it just, I mean, I've been doing this. My dad logged, my grandfather logged. I've got family history in Montana going back 6 generations. I mean, it's just frustrating because it seems so simple. My dad was even a firefighter in the 70s and 70s and then early 80s. And I remember him talking about fuel reduction and fire adapted species and ladder fuels and these things that we still aren't paying. None of this science is new about treating forests and reducing fuels and making resilient, healthy forests. It's not new,
Right. But they're causing more of the problem, and you have to sit and put up with it. And, for Oregon, with all the private timber owners, it's so boarded with BLM land, Forest Service land. So you can have yours all cleaned up and all the fire and the tinder stuff gone. But your neighbors, it's like living it's like having the nice house in the crummy trailer park. You know what I mean? And it's like, it doesn't matter. The neighbors aren't taking care of their land, and all that lightning has to do is hit them, and then it's destroying you too. So as proactive as you are, it doesn't matter, because the federal government is really chained down by this lie, and everybody's suffering for it. So let me ask you a couple of off the cuff. Best thing about Montana.
Best thing about Montana? How do you narrow that down? That's almost impossible. The people. Montana's got the best people on the planet. We've got great people, and you can still maybe not as much as Alaska, but you can still find some solitude here. And there's a thought process in Montanans and Montana that I don't think you find elsewhere, that just makes me proud to be here. And I feel lucky to have the existence that I've got.
What's your biggest fear for Montana?
Well, if I'm being totally honest, we've already hit my biggest fear. I always thought, man, if Montana hits 1 million people, we're going to be in trouble, and you're not going to be able to go hunting without seeing other people. A population boom hurts, but my biggest fear for Montana is that we put ourselves into a position where we're not able to manage our forests. We're not able to have, people like to move and come to Montana because they think it's the Wild West. And I feel like I'm the Wild West, sawmills and loggers are the Wild West. Those ranchers, that's the Wild West. These people are what everybody wants to emulate and dress like, lumber sexual and all these types of things. And then why are you trying to put us out of business?
Right. Well,
I hope that answered your question.
No, it does. And being a newbie and coming here, I asked people online, 22,000 responses, like, what should a guy from Oregon not do and what should he do? And it was everything from get the hell out of here and go home but most people were really nice. And what I find is, I think people are afraid of people coming in, but once you go in and you say, you know what, I'm not here to change anything. I love what you have. I want to assimilate. I want to become part of Montana. I don't want, but I think the hard thing coming in from Oregon is I already start to see some of the things that I saw coming into my state from the state below it. And you're seeing that coming into Montana, and it bugs me, because it's like, you guys, this is how it starts. Let me tell you, this is how it begins,
I for the last probably 20 years, I've said, you want to see what Montana is going to be, just look at Colorado, and we're following the trajectory that Colorado. Whereas, I think they finally got a lumber mill back going. But if you remember the beetle epidemic that they had, which led into the fires that they've got, we're following. We're probably 10 or 15 years behind them, but everything that Colorado does, Montana is on track to do.
Right. Well, Sean, I would love to, when I get back, I'm going to Oregon for my kid's wedding. I'm going to be gone till the end of September. But when I get back, I'll get a hold of you, and I'd love to come out there. Just, take a day. I'll just hang out, spend the night somewhere, just come over there and have you give me a tour and show me, so I can kind of figure out, and we can shoot some video and do some stuff like that. It'd be really fun.
I think that's a great idea. I'll give you a mill tour, and then we'll run around. I've got some great things. We've been doing work on, the prison land. They own 40,000 acres right behind our sawmill, and we can kind of daylight what they've been doing. They've done good work. The federal forest, you come out and I'll show you good things.
I think it's important that Montana and Oregon see each other, you know what I mean? And understand I think there's some things we're doing that are good over there and that we're doing over here that are really good. And I honestly believe this is how you fight this whole thing, is you let people in Oregon know what you're going through, and you guys know. So this becomes an effort where you can go in and say, you have to start doing this differently, because this is insane. Yep. Sean Steinbach, thank you so much. Sun Mountain Lumber, and we appreciate your time. And again, I'm going to hold you to that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm here for you. Thanks for having me, Rick.
Okay, you're welcome. We'll see you later. So that's our show for tonight. I want to thank Chris Stanel Family Dentistry and Compton Family Wineries out of Philomath. Isn't that fun? I mean, to see the differences, and yet, what's really interesting, the similarities, because I'll tell you what, when you get outside of the urban core of Oregon, Douglas County, Harney County, and tons more, we're all like, we're different, but we're similar. And there's still a lot of people out there. I said to somebody, they asked me, what happened to common sense? And I said, you know what? Sense isn't common anymore, but that's in the urban areas. You get outside the urban areas, and common sense is, I was listening to Jordan Peterson the other day, and he said, one of the problems we have in this country is, he says, there's people who have common sense and they just understand why something isn't right. You know what I mean? It's just like, that isn't right. They get it. Either through experience or what they've read, but they understand it, and maybe they don't articulate it as well as the college professors and the elite, because they come up with all the words, and all they want to do is argue and debate to win. All the rest of us want to do is have a place where everybody can live, and the way we're supposed to live, not under someone else's thumb. So common sense is alive and well out there. We just have to make it more common. And I think by joining forces with Montana and Oregon and showing people, I've got news for you. Even people in Northern California get it. Way north, but Northern California gets it. All right, that's our show for tonight. Have a good day, and I will talk to you. We'll see you tomorrow night. Good night.